And then they were like, we want to run the programs for the kids, and then it's going off into its own organization. My kids needed it. I brought them to an event that was here. She was not
Okay. Position here. Welcome everyone to the launch of Polyamory for Dummies with author Jamie Grant and in conversation with J.D. Davids and our lovely host Kelly Dunham, who made this event happen. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, along with my lovely partner, Don Jokum. The Bureau is an all-volunteer independent queer bookstore that we founded in 2012, and that has been here at the LGBT Community Center since 2014. As an all-volunteer bookstore, we are in the habit of asking for donations. Donations and sales are what keep this boat afloat. So we especially encourage donations if you know you won't be buying a book. But you're welcome to do both. So there's some change in the bag and a QR code on the back if you'd like to give through Venmo. If you're able to support us, we appreciate it. And for those of you online, if you would like to make a donation, you can go to Venmo and find us at BGSQD. The Bureau has regular business hours Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. And then we often stay open later when we have events such as this. And if you're not already on our email list, you can sign up for that at the register and you'll get an email every other Monday about our upcoming events. And for those of you watching online, if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, you can do that on our website. Those initials again are bgsqd.com. So before we get started, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. The Bureau also recognizes Palestinian liberation as a queer issue, and we have a statement with more words about that at the back so that I won't take up more of your time right now, but you can get one of those by the register if you're interested, and there are some links for more information. And with that, my part of this endeavor is done. I'm going to hand the mic over to Kelly, and we're going to jump on in.
Thank you. Can you give it up for the Bureau, guys? I always just call them the guys, like they're my brothers or something, because they kind of are, yeah. Okay, and I'm going to pass over. By the way, I'm going to be looking at my phone, not because I'm an asshole, although occasionally I guess I am, but also I'm trying to tend a little bit to the live stream because we did promise, for various reasons, that we would make it interactive. The end.
Hey. Hi everybody. It's so great to be here, and it's so great to be here with these queer legends to my left and right, J.D. Davids and Kelly Dunham, who's done so much work to get us here. So super excited to do this bit together and celebrate the launch of Polyamory for Dummies here in New York. And so to start off, because I'm a workshoppy lesbian, everyone has papers that you can build your poly world from. And if you're not poly, you can just sort of play with it and think, oh, if I was poly, what might be the things that would constitute and matter to me about creating my polycule? And if you don't know what a polycule is, it's the construction of polyamorous and molecule, sort of the putting together of our polyfamilies.
it's also on Kelly's site.
Say, oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I put the link in the live chat, so if folks on the live stream need it, you could just, yeah, it's a JPEG there, so.
Yeah, so everybody can do it. We're all gonna do it for a minute or two, and then we're gonna come back and talk about them. And there are pens here, right? Pens
At the register.
at the register, if you don't have them.
Yeah, we've got pins. Anyone need a pen? Oh, okay.
Pens are coming.
We've got plenty, you can share. Okay, one, two.
Queers love a good worksheet.
Need one more?
Sending it to you.
These are play sheets, really. If there's anything on the play sheet, worksheet, that you don't understand or questions you have about language, feel free to ask in the chat or here.
Also, spoiler alert, I picked 3 things, but then made up another 6.
Yeah, so
I circled 3 things, and then I made up 6 other things and wrote them into the bottom, and you can too.
And also, yeah, I actually was like, oh, yeah, this is something I should require, yes, this is
It could be aspirational.
aspiration.
well, why don't we talk about ours while our friends look at theirs? You want to tell us what's on your sheet, JD?
Okay. Hi, my name's JD Davids. I use he, him pronouns. I live in Brooklyn, and I'm from Philadelphia. I'm part of the active Philadelphia diaspora. And I am currently at the CUNY biography and memoir program, where I'm working on a memoir about turning into a sex god during the COVID-19 pandemic, which we are still in, and I'm still a sex god. So, thanks for having me here. And what I have on my sheet is the things I circled were minimal processing. I need a dom-sub dynamic for at least one partner. I drew an arrow from my disability is incorporated, not seen as a problem, to all of my partners are disabled and chronically ill. Not that I was requiring that, but it's really great. And sexual adventure is a must. And then the additional ones are, if you're a cisgender man, be submissive and useful. Have compatible COVID practices, which is before seeing me or anyone in my household or polycule, not being unmasked with people who are with anyone unmasked for the last 5 days, and doing a molecular COVID test before we see each other at least once a week, because rapid tests don't work very well. Be into me being a sex god. And in fact, it's my partners that helped me realize I was a sex god. Thank you very much to all of you on the live stream tonight for that collective process. Many of my partners are people like myself who weren't necessarily meant to survive, but we somehow have. Have lots of sex with me, and be accepting of other things I do sexually that aren't with my polycule partners. And last, I didn't require this, but I realized I have a top, a bottom, a switch, and a sub. And that's really a good mix, yeah.
I put kitchen table poly, my friends are my primary loves, which is true. I need a dominant or subdynamic for at least one partner. Yeah. I don't know that I have a lot to say about any of those. I do feel like being on the apps, I'm using Field for various reasons. I do feel like being on the apps, I have to put like, yes, I have a short haircut. Yes, I am submissive, because otherwise, short haircut somehow means automatically dominant.
Don't make assumptions, that's poly rule number 1. I have my friends are my primary loves. I need a neurodivergent affirming group because the current group is already very neurodivergent. I need to live solo. Nobody's ever gonna live with me again, except for my kids. They have to come back. I want at least one extrovert who wants to talk about everything, kinky as fuck, and let's build a revolution together. Anybody want to say what's on theirs? Or share something about what this process was like for you to even think about it. One of the things I do in all workshops is to say, you don't ever have to share personal information, you could share your process. Yes,
I'll say what's on my sheet.
yes, go.
Okay. My friends are my primary loves. I want tons of romance, but I don't want to have sex all the time. Because it says that all, so I kind of mix that up a little bit. Someone must be funny, laughter, and people with big passions.
Love. So people with big passions, friends are your primary loves.
Romance, lots of romance, but not sex.
Lots
all
of
the
romance
time.
and not necessarily a lot of
And
sex.
somebody has to be funny.
Somebody, please, God, be funny.
Here, here.
You're here. Anybody else before we go on? Yes, Lauren.
Well, I think of 11.
11 because queers never follow the rules.
But I'll just read the first few. Don't ask, don't tell while respecting established limits. Queer and trans partners only. I need a dominant subdynamic. Someone has to top me, well, those are related. I need to live solo.
Need to live solo, dom sub dynamics. What was the
Queer
number?
and trans.
Queer and trans partners only. Great. So one of the reasons I put this together was that if you've been reading poly literature for a while, there's kind of this paradigm out there that consists of usually one cis white guy with two women, white women, who may or may not relate to each other sexually or even like each other. And that's partly because of who's been writing the books about polyamory for a long time. And the really amazing thing about Wiley and Polyamory for Dummies is this book is so queer. We have 24 queer and trans contributors who gave their stories to the book. JD, one of them, has given a number of really great stories to the book. And I really wanted to dislodge this idea, this paradigm. And in the book, there's just a million really interesting ways people are making it up. So I wanted us to start by realizing, you know, there are really infinite ways to have your poly life, and you can just make it up exactly how you want it. So I thought I'd start by asking my dear partners here, how did you come to poly?
I'm trying to think of how it happened. I don't know, I came out, actually, JD and I have both lived in Philadelphia in the 90s, 1,000 years ago. You know, doing like my kind of queer coming out post-convent, long story.
Favorite.
Was into organizing the Philadelphia Dyke March. And so we were all just kind of like a puppy pile family almost, and also having a fair amount of sex with each other. And I guess the polyamorousness was an assumption, but then later when I started to date and realized like, oh, I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and not that my siblings are like sex partners, I'm not saying that at all. But I do like a lot of chaos around. I like a lot of folks around. I live, you know, in one of New York's intentional, unintentional communities, you know, unintentional, intentional communities. I'm on the lease of a rent stabilized apartment, and so I'm always gonna live with people, right? Always. And I realized when 2 of my roommates were out of town for a little while, they just happened to overlap, and I was like, oh, when I'm by myself, I become feral in a way that's not good, you know? So it just is like my core. I don't know if I don't feel like it is my core.
For me, growing up in adolescence, I didn't know this is what I was doing, but my sort of sexual behavior was somewhat stereotypically sort of gay male, as far as like cruising and anonymous sex and having different partners, but was all considered like cheating or slutty, you know, which it was by many definitions. So then I always, you know, sort of failed at monogamy. And so then I came out, I didn't know I was a queer youth. And I didn't know I wasn't, you know, female. Maybe, I don't know what I am, but I'm trans. But like, Then when I was 19, I got married to my high school boyfriend, who I had cheated on a lot, and sort of settled down for a while to get through college and get away from my family of origin. And then I joined ACT UP. And my quick story about that is I was in ACT UP Philadelphia for 13 years and 3 sexual orientations. And then and being in ACT UP would coincide with getting my first girlfriend after we were both in a police riot. Anyway, so failed at monogamy with her, and then went on to try and be poly, and then failed at poly for a long time. Later we're going to talk about our poly superpower, but another spoiler is mine may be learning from my many mistakes. So that's how I became poly, is just sort of failing at everything else, failing at that, and now finally I think figuring it out.
Amazing. And for me, I got to college in the late 70s, early 80s, and was dating guys, and I had this really hot boyfriend who was a football player, and I could see that he wasn't going to be monogamous. I mean, he was like gorgeous, like, the girls were throwing themselves at him every weekend, and he was like, well, I want us to be boyfriend and girlfriend, and I was like, cool, yes, I could do that, but you're not going to be monogamous, so I'm not going to be monogamous either. And he was like, what? Of course I'm going to be monogamous. What are you talking about? And I was like, Brad. Brad. I was like, I see you, and you're not going to be monogamous, so neither am I. And, so we did do the boyfriend-girlfriend thing for a couple of years, but it was totally cool for him. Everybody knew he was having sex with everybody, and I was totally branded for it, right? It was like, you're immediately, not playing by the rules as a girl in 1981, 1982. So I feel like that was sort of one of my early experiences of being queered, and the women's movement was ascendant, and I just was not going to not have the same kind of exploration and finding out about myself that my male partners did. And so that was really, I certainly didn't call it poly then. Poly wasn't even a word then, right? Poly as a term was kind of coined in the early 90s in a West Coast commune. But as we know, and what I talk about in the book, is that polyamory as a practice is thousands of years old, and really capitalism and Christianity, and marriage really came in to supplant those practices, because people wanted to pass down their, inheritances, so they had to know who was who and who belonged to who. But if you squint at your family tree, you can see polyamory all over it. I do all this ancestry work with my Irish ancestry, and I have found often in this little spit of land in the north of Ireland that I'm related to everyone, but I'm not related the way I'm supposed to be related to everyone. I think Ancestry.com has kind of ripped the lid off the lie of monogamy, right? That, these religious traditions put these practices over on top of it, but that really, multiple lover relationships over a lifetime have persisted despite all that. So I do talk a lot in the book about what the 21st century innovation is in monogamy, which is because of our social movements, there's a lot more equity for women, people of color, queers. We can determine the terms of our own lives so much better. We can buy our own places, some of us, not now. We can choose our partners and have our relationships secured in ways that we couldn't in other generations. And so being able to form our families as we choose is, more of us can do it. And consent, full disclosure, and mutual respect are the innovations that we're bringing into polyamory in this century. And that's, the stories in this book really are full of people really sort of yearning and stretching themselves into that promise of what multiple lover relationships can be over a lifespan. I just love them. I think it really gives flesh and blood to the book and a lot of the really rudimentary concepts. So yeah, let's talk about what your poly superpower is, though. In the book, we talk a lot about communication, of course. Poly people are supposed to be the sex nerds. We're supposed to talk about sex more than we have it, and I don't think that's true. But I'd love to talk about what you think in terms of managing communication and long-term relationships with multiple lovers. What's your superpower?
I would say that my superpower is probably a little bit and it's, our superpower is also our, you know, when people are in a job interview, what's your best characteristic? X. What's your worst characteristic? X, always, right? So everything for me is a good memory. I really don't remember the bad things that happen. Everything gets kind of funneled out, which is so good for mental health and extremely poor for decision making. So I am the person who will remember, no, like there was a really good part of that. And that definitely should not happen. Like, don't put that into a dyad. That's gonna be terrible. But it works out all right when there's more people involved. Also, GJ Hodson, who like apparently knew you from 20 years ago, is commenting that you are the person who taught them all about polyamory.
Wow. I don't know who that is. But maybe it's because that you're doing a pseudonym or it's on somebody else's account, but that's so nice. Yay.
But you've taught lots of people, because Jamie's been part of the sex track at Creating Change and running all those workshops for many years.
Yes,
So.
that's what
Anyway, yeah, so I said one of my superpowers. I think another one, in addition to learning from my mistakes, is getting people organized around care for each other, or maybe just care for me, no, but care for what, like being I'm an organizer, and so, you know, helping people stay organized. It is true that I have 4 partners and they all are neurodivergent, and at least 3 explicitly have ADHD, and they have very great superpowers along with that. So sometimes I can help by remembering things, and sometimes they help me by having structures in place to help you remember things. So I feel that we do, even though we're not really like constituted as sort of like a collective officially, but you know, we in different ways and explicit or implicit ways are helping each other out, and that's going to be kind of more important than ever.
So good. I mean, I think mine is that I can take responsibility for myself when I've fucked up, you know, and I've just had a lot of help. I'm in recovery. I've been sober for 35 years. I have a lot of people around me that help me with accountability in these incredible loving ways, and have been in the movie for a really long time, right? So they're not, you know, they're not finger pointers. They're people who will say to me very gently, "Oh, you did that on Tuesday? I thought you said you weren't gonna do that anymore," you know? Or, you know, that other relationship, that little breach you have there that, you know, I thought you were gonna work on mending that. You know, what's happening with that right now? So that's just an incredible gift in my life. And we're going to talk about how to make a great apology a little later, because it's one of my favorite bits in the book, because I do think we are in such a, you know, the world is burning, you know, our country's falling apart around us every day. And, you know, our relationships are so important, and how we're taking care of each other and how we're mending, you know, lots of rifts that have come at us because we're dealing with so much structural violence all the time, and there's so much stress on our relationships. And I think we've got to build more superpowers, whether we're poly or whatever we are, around taking care of our relationships. So we are going to talk tools. There's tons of tools and tons of inventories in the book, and you know, it's a, you know, like all beginner things, you know, that I was really encouraged as I was writing it to do little bits that people could just grab onto and learn something more about themselves. So there's lots of fun things to do like that in the book. But to go back and push back a little on the tendency for us all to talk endlessly as poly people about however it's working, let's tell some sexy poly stories. Who has a really fun sexy poly story they want to tell?
Mine is definitely not fun, so.
It's not fun?
Mine's fun.
Yeah.
I'm rearranging my seating, you know.
Yep.
I one of the things that is helpful in my polycule, if that's what we are, is some consistency in scheduling. So every Friday night, one of my partners comes to where I live with my nesting partner, and my nesting partner goes to stay with their other partner. So I have my partner over, and then Saturday night is my big date night with my nesting partner, who we've lived together for like 10 years now. And these two of my partners are very, almost even like sibling-like, they get along very well with each other. And they have a kind of cute relationship. I hope that they will, they can chime in on the last one, but so they get to sort of sometimes notice through my body that one's been doing things the night before that then the other person benefits from or sees a bruise or an opening that they can then explore. So that's just charming. I think that's really charming. And there's not, it's not sexual between them. So that's very compersive, which is a poly word that's about feeling good and warm when your other people are experiencing pleasure, even if it's not from you. So that's one of the nicest, kind of cutest compersive things that I've experienced.
That's lovely, and thank you. It made me think of something also, that somebody that I dated for a while was somebody, a top, who, like many tops, and like myself when I top, when she got wound up, she was a lot, and sometimes was very enthusiastic. And so her nesting partner and I kind of used to take turns, like, okay, who's gonna take one for the team and take like the first play session at Queer Invasion or whatever. And we would often text about that, like, have you got this one? And also something that was really lovely is that person was stoned with me, but I would send her home like very, very revved up for the other partner, and they'd been dating for like a decade. And that always felt like, this is amazing service.
Right.
That's really beautiful. I have Creating Change stories. If any of you have gone to the National LGBTQ Task Force's Creating Change conference, I have so many great. But this one memory just stuck me tonight. It was the first time I was on the staff, which was the early 90s, and I was staying with Tom DiMaria, who used to run the Frameline Film Festival, just a legend. And so I think we're both on the staff and we're in the room, and so he would leave, and he came in one time and I was with one of my lovers, and we were having like one of, like a lesbian emotional, my love is crying, or, he's like, oh, we're in bed, and he's like, oh, let me go out in the hall, and, whatever. So he leaves. And then he comes back like 3 hours later, and I'm in bed with someone else. And it was just so common in that era. And the gay men were so like irritated with me about how much I was getting. And there was something about the task force guys in those years, like they were never getting it because they were somehow not sexy for being like activists. Are you freaking kidding me? They were great guys, and they were just like, Tom was like, oh my God, am I ever gonna be able to sleep? It's just great, but yes. Yeah, so there's a lot of fun to be had, not just processing. I am also a minimal processing polycule. I really have had a lifetime of it. I've had enough of it. So, people who are in my orbit now know, we gotta really keep it simple because I want to spend my time doing other stuff, including having great sex.
Which is your other book.
Which is my other book.
Plug.
Yes, you could get that tonight too. I wonder if we should talk about Amber Hollabaugh for a minute, because this is the Amber Hollabaugh series, and one of the things we really wanted to talk about was polyamory as care. And the book is dedicated to Amber, along with 3 or 4 other really core lesbian feminists, many of whom aren't here anymore, who formed my activist trajectory. But yeah, let's talk about Amber and care. Anybody?
Well, I would like to say that I didn't know Amber that well, but sort of worked alongside her for a little while, and she actually reminded me very much of you and Emily, who's one of your people, in the sense that all of you, like, we could have met earlier, we just happened not to. I'm a little bit younger, and we were probably the same protests, but didn't organize the same ones. But all of you just welcomed me as if I had been friends with you for years, and just a warmth, and like, there were no hurdles. There was no I didn't have to prove myself or work my way in. Once we were able to be in the same room, that we were off and running, right? And so her warmth and smile and generosity of spirit and bringing people in a fold that maybe people didn't even know I needed, but just having someone working next to me at a desk for a different struggling nonprofit thing than my struggling nonprofit, just immediately having community and trust in a certain way that opened communication also is something I experienced with you.
Yeah, when I think of Amber, I mostly think of the years when the four orgs were on 24th Street and Queer. She was working for Queers for Economic Justice, and she was just really generous with. I watched her be very generous with somebody's straight mom that came to one of the fundraisers. And somebody's, to be frank, quite annoying straight mom that came to, like you think, oh, I'm gonna hang out with Queers for Economic Justice, not gonna have to deal with somebody's straight mom, but I remember watching Amber and I was like, she could have just been like, fuck you, you know what I mean? But she wasn't, she was generous, and I really learned from that. Yeah.
Well, I think that the term queer precarity, I really hadn't heard or understood fully until Amber's work. And I just finished a study that I did with Urvashi Vad, who also I dedicated the book to, is also not with us anymore. And we looked at 5,000 LGBTQ women. We asked them 170 questions about their lives, and 50% of them were living with a disability, which means, if we are queer women partnering with other queer women in our polycules, there is just going to be a lot of disability. Also, 47% of us have survived intimate partner violence. And, I have to say, the gaslighting situation in queer women's lives is so serious. Like, so many women are trapped in situations where their lovers are lying to them, disrupting their friendship networks, and isolating them. And I feel like it's so common we think of it as a relationship problem instead of actual violence and like curtailing people's actual lives. So I feel like, Amber's work really, prepared me for this, this bit of work, and the way that she loved us all and insisted on us telling each other the truth. That's in the book. I mean, it's so amazing to write a very queer book in a very mainstream package, right? And I was really so stunned and appreciate that the publisher just let me do it. And there's a lot of great transformative justice pieces in here that come really from the trajectory of Amber's work. So I'm proud of that, and I hope it's helpful to people. Anybody have anything they want to say? Should I keep going?
Keep going.
Okay. There's a lot in here on jealousy and attachment, because of course that's why everybody thinks polyamory is impossible. And I always say, if you think polyamory is impossible, try monogamy. Because jealousy and attachment are where we get hooked. And I like to say, jealousy is really like a regime. It's an indoctrination. We are indoctrinated from the minute we get here to think that if we really love someone, we have to lock them down. And it's natural to feel jealous, and it's an imperative to feel jealous about somebody sort of encroaching on your territory. And it's just something that can be unlearned. It's just like any feeling that you have. It doesn't have to be the last feeling that you have. It's just a first feeling, right? So in the book, I work a lot with it because I coach a lot with couples and triads and polycules, and jealousy is just something that comes up constantly. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book about jealousy. Just time up. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I say, we're taught that jealousy is a love response, but it's really a scarcity response. So I encourage people to think, in general, what are your jealous feelings trying to tell you about what's happening between you and your partner? Or what are your partner's jealous feelings communicating about them? What could jealousy be revealing about what's working or not working in your relationship? And what can you learn from it? And in the world of scarcity responses, I really think at bottom, our jealousy is just terror that we're not enough and that someone's gonna leave us, right? And so I do this whole inventory called What Would It Mean to Be Enough? And like a lot of the inventories in the book, people just go back through their story. So what's your first memory of feeling like you weren't enough? Too big or too small, not smart, cute, funny, strong, or hot enough? How old are you? Who's telling you this? What kind of impact did this have on you? What's your most humiliating memory of not being enough? How do you think this impacts you today? Are the messengers or catalysts in these scenarios trustworthy? Have the messengers or catalysts in these scenarios harmed you in other ways? How or why are you giving them power? What if you stopped believing these lies? What might life be like in a world where you're enough? And, you know, sort of in my poly utopia, and really in a lot of my poly world that I live in, I feel like enough every day. I mean, I feel like more than enough. I feel kind of amazing. I've got very doty people in my life. I'm sure some of them are watching. You know, I call this the era of like obvious love in my life. You know, when for so long I sort of waited in a corner in whatever configuration I was in for someone to show me or prove to me. Like everything was always a silent little test. And in this era, there's just so much abundance. It's kind of crazy. So, thoughts on that?
Congratulations.
Is this when I should read my little piece?
Yes,
Okay, here. I have my own one.
Yes, you've got a great piece. So
Yeah,
I'm
what page is it? It was written on here.
wrote it down.
One moment, please.
One moment, please.
Page 117.
Yes.
So this is one of the stories I contributed to the book, and it's the other, okay. It's another one of the ones, but I wanted to give you a preface. Like Jamie, I'm also in recovery, and a lot of what has enabled me to really be a good poly partner is from, you know, what I've learned through that. But this came before that. It was sort of, I had these light bulbs ahead of time that then now fit more of a construct that I could sort of, you know, use.
This
Oh.
is the beach one.
Oh, that's the beach one.
117.
Okay, the beach one's jealousy
So
too.
this is,
Okay, so,
there are several JD stories in the book for your enjoyment.
and this is about someone who I now refer to as my ex-mother, who, part of why I get to have a good life now is that I no longer have people in my life who aren't good for me. So the title is Who's the Parent Here? I have a vivid memory from long ago when I was on the phone with my mother. She told me she was moving. I was looking at this big atlas in my kitchen. This must have been in the 1990s because I wasn't looking at the internet. She was telling me she was getting back with her husband. She had often used me as a confidant in her life, as a supportive ear on the difficulties she had in that relationship, and then she'd make whatever decision she wanted. She was like this throughout my childhood, terrible boundaries and an inappropriate dependence on me, and then I had no control over what she did. Her behavior was disturbing, always inconsistent and unpredictable. What popped into my head when she told me this was, where is my partner, P? In that moment, I clearly was upset with her lack of constancy, so I was projecting this onto my partner, P, who I was in a non-monogamous, we called it, relationship with. I hadn't had any clarity about how one thing was related to the other until that moment. I was in a triad at that time where we were all three all together and there were dyads within. We had an undoable list of rules with a lot of attachment stuff floating around. P's emotional orientation at that time was they seemed to get off in duplicitousness and setting people against each other. Both of my partners were breaching agreements and cheating on me with each other, basically, because we had so many rules too. All of these insights came much later, but I had this flash of insight on the phone that day. I'm looking at the atlas and literally saying, where is P? And I realized this insecurity and worry is really about my parent, not my partner. Oh, sorry.
No, thank you, it's okay. Yeah, so that's a great bit about trying to get current, right? That the jealousies and the fears that we have are often installed much earlier, and the kind of attachment fears that we have are playing out in this kind of like, I'm jealous or I'm scared of what you're doing. Just look at. So coping with jealousy in the book, one of the things I note is that in monogamy culture, you're supposed to be jealous, but in poly culture, you're not supposed to be jealous. So like you're judged either way. You're judged, and cool polyamorous people get jealous. In my experience, everybody gets jealous. It's not like you can just unlearn this, while you're swimming in this soup, right? So I always encourage my clients to go toward jealousy rather than to get defensive and push back, and try to join and align with your jealous partner and ask them what the heck's going on, right? Make affirmative statements. Act like you're on the same team. So I have things like, oh honey, tell me more about this. I thought you were excited about my new lover. Or I'm so glad you told me you're feeling this way. Thank you for trusting me. I'm so sorry you've been carrying these feelings by yourself. It must have been really hard. Do you know what you need right now? How can I support you? So I do a lot of these little cute acronyms in the book, and this is don't jeer, don't judge, escalate, egg on, or ridicule. A lot of people really just try to bury this kind of conflict when they have poly stuff, and then we'll sort of beat you up with poly values to close down the conversation, right? And, if you can just stay in it and try to figure out what's going on in your relationship, that it's coming up, and then just stay on the same team. And so for that, it's read the situation. And read is reassure, embrace, affirm, and de-escalate. So it's cute. I think I'll go on to another cute one, which is the other thing that I work with quite a bit is monogamous couples who come in and want to open up a relationship. Like that's really the most common. And often one partner wants to more than another. Often there's been like maybe an emotional affair that's happened, that's been hidden, that's just come out, or they're in crisis. Maybe there's been a bigger breach of trust than that. So there's often work to do to just figure out, is this even possible given the moment that you're in, right? So I say, well, start with hot goals to open your relationship. And H is honor where you're at. Like if you've had a big trust breach, now's not the time. You're gonna have to do some repair work before you can do that, right? O is offer. Just like make an offer for trying things out. What couples will say to me all the time is, the relationship is the most important thing for me to preserve, right? That's what I want. And then they'll be like, but I'm fundamentally monogamous or I'm fundamentally polyamorous, and we're at this place where we're at polar opposites. And I always say, if you're fundamentally polyamorous and your partner's fundamentally, monogamous, we don't have to have a second session. It's time to work on how you're going to break up. But if there's a little wiggle room here and you're not fundamentalists, right? There's always a third way, and you can build a third way together by trying to figure out where the comfortable spaces are for you to try things out. And as we said in the beginning, when we had our sheet in a million different ways to make our poly lives, there are a million options around, our need to be either totally, blind to what's going on with our partners or close in around what's happening, right? So hot goals. The T is try. Just try a few things. And don't take the biggest swing out of the gate. Just try a few simple things. Maybe go to a bar with your partner and pick somebody up with them. Maybe help them make a profile on Field, and then just giggle a little bit about all the possibilities, right? Try to stay on the same team and try a few things out. And I think as people build their tolerance for seeing their partner leave and come home, and the train doesn't just run away, and also that energy comes back into the relationship around what it means to trust someone, right? All of that can build and create more possibility for building more goals together. Thoughts?
I think that's very helpful advice. I also think that a couple of things that brought up for me is, I remember when I was in that triad, there was a moment where I was like, my life would be better and interesting if I wasn't with either of these people. And that's ultimately what happened. But it lasted for a couple of years after that where I felt really much less jealous because I had this other like flash of insight that there would be some advantages if it didn't work out, but that allowed me to not fear so much that it wasn't gonna work out. And I do think there's some really practical aspects of poly that may be intensified in relationships or scenarios where there's like, for example, limited energy or spoons, like spoons is like a spoons theory about, that's used by disabled or chronically ill people, that you only get so many spoons of energy and you have to give away a spoon every time you answer the phone or do the dishes or have a date, right? And so I do think that I loved what you're saying in terms of experiments and stuff. I think something to be open about is that I've had to figure out for myself is that it can be hard for people to calculate what they'll be like when they come back. You know, so really if I'm being open and saying, go have a great time, see what it's like, and someone comes back and they're tired and cranky, like it is part of my responsibility to notice that and not say, oh, you're tired and cranky. Like we're figuring it out and people may not know ahead of time or, you know, so there's a sort of need to have some grace and really be in the process, because if someone then has to like then put on a performance more when they come home, it's just gonna wear them out, you know, potentially. And so that's been something that I've had to get right with inside myself and be like maybe that I need to have something really yummy to eat or something really good for myself if someone's not gonna be that on their game. And so, you know, and for example, like in my polycule, people have really different sleeping schedules. You know, and there's someone who's one of my partners who when they're with another partner, their sleeping schedule kind of shifts. And that's kind of can be really funny when we get back together and stuff. But it just is, like, it's not that they're prioritizing one over the other. It may result in changes over time for whatever sort of seems to be best for them and everybody, but it's not wrong or bad. But I think it is important to be able to say, hey, I'm noticing that you're tired after this, and so maybe we should adapt our timing or something like that. And that can be hard for people to hear. They may feel sort of like you're calling them out or something, you know, but it's like, so it's all tricky. It can be pretty tricky, you know, and I get really jealous. And so I can say I'm a poly person who gets really jealous, and it's really helpful. Yeah, it's sort of like a beacon of what is this really about. And also sometimes it really just is basically like, I want all the attention and I want all the candy and I want all the sex. You know, it's not deep. You know? And then I have to be like, JD, you can't have all the attention, you can't have all the candy, you can't have all the sex. You know, so yeah.
Folks were actually, thanks so much, JD. Folks were addressing that in the chat about like yes, it's true. There is, you know, we have a scarcity mindset, but there is finite time, right?
Yes.
There's finite time and finite energy. And just to bring it back to the care conversation, that has been something that has helped me with jealousy as far as the most recent kind of complicated polyamorous situation that I was in, when the person had something kind of terrible happen, that I knew that when my capacity was limited, mostly because of chronic pain, their other partner was able to kind of jump in. And there is something very kind of beautiful about being very, and I think it comes with age, although I suppose it could come with other things as well, is like, we're all very specific. What we have to give is actually pretty specific. You know, if you want somebody to do a spreadsheet for you, don't call me. You know, it's gonna be my expense report for my day job. I once got an award for it being the worst expense report I'd ever seen. And I was trying, you know, like, so you don't want that from me. But if you want somebody to like show up at your hospital room and, you know, move into the hospital for 3 months, you know, while you struggle with some illness, yeah, I'm your boy. So, yeah, there is something that also helps that with jealousy of like, if you can get what I'm offering somewhere else, then I'm not that specific, and so good for you. I'm so glad you can, and that takes a little bit of the pressure off for me to always like be the only one too, so.
Yeah,
can we talk about what it means to be like taking life on a team during this period? I mean, I would say my polycule and my poly life, that I have these like really 6 beloveds who just have me in their sights all the time. It's just so crucial to my well-being. It's crucial to my mental health. It's been crucial to my physical health at different points. Yeah, it's, you know, I think of it as such a queer technology, and, you know, and a tradition and something to be proud of. And in the current discourse, it's, you know, it's a poly practice, right? But it's such a historic queer practice.
Yeah, I mean, for me, obviously, you know, being in like mind and right relationship around airborne pathogen avoidance in my polycule is pretty essential, because we all went into this, well, most of us were already chronically ill or disabled before the COVID-19 pandemic, and that means everyone, including everyone here tonight and everyone on the live stream, is at risk of long COVID, which very seldom gets better. And you're more at risk if you're already chronically ill and disabled, and I now have long COVID too, and I don't want to get worse. And so that's part of why I'm writing a memoir about becoming a sex god in the time of COVID-19, because I don't want to gloat and I don't want to minimize at all how difficult it is and how isolated people are, and also how limiting it can be to have fatiguing chronic illnesses, for example, or some of the, you know, economic hardships or other things that people are facing. However, I have a really great life, and it's probably the first time in my life that I'm getting as much sex as I kind of really want, found my level and my people, and it's because we all have these common practices. We've been revising our Google Doc, you know, every few months in the course of the pandemic. Not the first few months, but all of my partners, except my nesting partner, I've met in the course of this pandemic, you know, and it's on purpose because we are compatible this way. And that I know a lot of people are really lonely, and I want to encourage people as queers to think about if you could do things that may benefit your health in the long run and allow you to bring more beautiful, fantastic, hot people in your life, then put that mask back on or learn about molecular COVID testing. You can have a lot of fun. You know, there's a test you can do now if you get the little base station and stuff, which costs a bundle, but then for $7, you can test everyone at your little sex party, and you can be reasonably secure that no one's gonna give each other COVID for the next, 6 hours that you're having that fun. So you're missing out on a lot of really great people. Yeah, right, yeah. So you're missing out on a lot of really great people who are marginalized by their own communities, because we've all been so misled about what's at stake here and what we can do about it to take care of one another. People have just been written off, so that's my little bit of a lecture there, but I mean it.
Well, it seems like a good time to look at the other worksheet that we got, which if you flip your worksheet over, there is a pod map. And this is out of the work of Mia Mingus, and online people can get it. This is also, is this also?
It is, they're not having much success with
Success
it.
getting it, okay.
The
so
link is not showing
not
up in
working.
YouTube, yeah.
So, maybe if you're home, you can sort of look at
I'm
this.
gonna try and
Okay.
just type out the bit.ly in it, so
Yep.
we can just keep going.
So, this was originally created by the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collaborative for people who were escaping violent relationships, for them to map their resources, who was close to them and who could help them in an emergency. But I use it all the time to balance my mental health, my physical health, my fiscal health, the whole health of the enterprise of all the people in my life and how we're doing. And if I look at this, I'm at the center in the gray spot in the middle, and then there's 6 circles around with hard boundaries. And those are like my ride or die people. Some of the people who are in my polycule are there, and some of the other people in my life who I'm really close to. These are the people I can't lie to. These are the people who know everything about me. These are the people who help me grow, right? And when I do this workshops with people, some people don't have a single person in that. And so when you're thinking about whether you can, like for people who are sort of new to poly and thinking about coming into it, and they don't have a single person that they can really talk to about their sexuality, about their desires, about what they want to do, I say start here, like start building that foundation for yourself so that you've got, enough bandwidth to try to expand your intimate, sexual, social, familial base, right? So the people around the hard boundary people with the little dots are other people who care for you. I think of my neighbor Mike, who takes care of my cats and who makes me these incredible soups, and he does the cookie party at Christmas. He doesn't even know I'm poly, right? He doesn't know so many things about me, but he's such a great care person in my life. He's such a consistent, wonderful presence in my life. So Mike would be there. And then there's like these 4 pillars, these big circles on the outside. And I think of those as institutions and practices in your life that are really holding you up. For some people, it's their yoga practice. For me, I have a strength and vitality coach, Elizabeth Goldberg, who I love. Maybe she's on the stream. And, I'm totally uncoachable because, I won't go on a diet. Don't give me an exercise plan. Forget about trying to, get me in some kind of a regimen. And despite this, she's been able to help me grow more strength and flexibility and vitality in my body over the last 7 or 8 years. She's like a body alchemist, so Elizabeth's there. And then BTS, the boyfriend band from South Korea, is there because they are my place of joy. I look at the videos all the time. I find out what's happening with them. I go to the concerts. Like I have a whole world around that like has no politics in it. You know what I'm saying? It has no Sturm und Drang. It's just strictly like a beauty spot in my day. And then I have my NA meeting, 35 years sober. The people in that meeting, many of them have known me the whole 35 years. We do that every Monday night, almost without fail. And then in the 4th part, I go to Ireland once a year, and I've found my ancestral story of displacement and violence and starvation, which has helped me understand the way some of my relationship stuff has played out, which really, wow, missed that. And also the alcoholism, right? So since I've been going to Ireland, I'm no longer on depression medication because like colonization has real depressing effects. And reversing some of that also has health effects. So as you're looking at your life, thinking about, some people have therapists, some people, again, they walk every day. There are things that we're doing, practices and institutions we're relating to, social institutions that are holding us up. So again, when I do this with my clients, some people have nothing in the 4 corners. And it's like, well, let's start building those pillars so that you can start to think about how would I deal with my attachment issues or start to have a conversation in the community that I want to be poly, I want to branch out this way, and I have I've got to build my foundational support if that's what I'm going to do. So why don't we take a few minutes and work on your foundational document and we'll come back. Maybe, yes. This is in the book.
Haven't gotten to that page yet.
Yes,
I
it's
just
in
want to make
the,
sure that I can read about it.
yeah, it's in the chapter on coming out, because I think, there's so many hardships for people of every stripe in coming out. Our families of origin generally, it's poly is a no sale, a lot of our friendships are, with monogamous people, and frankly, coming out, for me, in monogamous community, people panic about it. I mean, they panic about their own relationships. You somehow seem to be a wild card all of a sudden, so you can have a lot of pushback. And so in the coming out chapter, I really emphasize getting, some kind of community around you if you're gonna come out.
Jean, do you ever talk, I'm looking at this and my first reaction is, I can't stand being in the center like that.
Ah, that's so interesting, Felicia. You are at the center of your life, though.
You say so.
You are. You're the main character.
Interesting.
Right? So,
I'm like, wow.
Yes.
I'll tell you what I work with Beth Lapides, who's the person who started on Cabaret. So I was complaining, and literally complaining about a show that I did in Columbus where they gave me a standing ovation, and she was like, Kelly, if you're a performer that can't stand a standing ovation, you're missing the whole point. So I'm not saying you're missing the whole point, but what she said was, like you are the center of your life, right? Like you are the center, and there is some graciousness in learning to, and I'm talking to myself here too, to learning to accept that you are the center, right?
Well, it's interesting. I also wonder, being a parent, right? I mean, it's such a decentering process all the time because the needs of the wee ones are primary. And I think, we are still the main characters when all that's going on. So, but I could see it can be a very tricky. Do you want to tell us about yours? People work on
Oh,
yours?
sure. Well, one of the things that I'm really embracing in 2025 is my parasocial relationships. Yeah, I didn't know what that meant until a couple of years ago.
What did
Maybe
you
other
tell
people
people?
don't know, but it means like fake relationships, like online relationships, or people in movies, people who you feel like you know them and you feel close to them, but they don't know you. So one of my parasocial relationships is Vinnie Thomas. He's a comedian, he's gay, he's so funny, and we're friends. I think we're friends. So you should look up, he's very funny. So that's a funny example. And I have a parasocial relationship with an entire radio station, WFMU, which is convenient because it's on 24 hours a day and it has archives. So if there's a show that I don't like, I can just listen to one of the ones one of my friends does. And I realized they were a parasocial relationship because during a brief period, about 10 or so years ago, I went off testosterone and I started instantly going through perimenopause. And I was having extra intense dreams. And I started dreaming about, and I still do, I dream about WFMU all the time. There's one particular DJ I've had really good sex with in my dreams. Anyway, so they're out here, on the edge. They're one of my edge people. There's others, but those are maybe my more surprising ones. My car, which is named Sweet Pea, I feel really strongly about because it allows me to do things, and one of the things I do living in Brooklyn, which is one of the reasons I don't live in Philadelphia anymore, is I can drive for half an hour and be at this beautiful nature beach that also has a unofficial gay, unofficially closed optional area. Talk to me about that later. So those beaches are on there too. Yeah, this is fun. This is great to do. So.
Yeah, one of the things that's really good about the parasocial, just like really just admitting that is a relationship that we are having. I mean, isn't the research that just looking at people's faces, like just looking at a large TV of somebody's face is very good for us? I mean, that makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, right? I feel like I'm having that relationship with anti-MLM YouTubers. Multi-level marketing never touches my life. Nobody ever tries to sell me Avon or get me to join Amway. It has nothing to do with my life, but it's like other people's drama that is like very, very soothing to me. So I listen to that all the time while I'm walking around when I should be listening to nonfiction audiobooks. And then also, I feel like I have a really my work, so I'm a comedian and a storyteller and a writer, but I'm also a nurse. And I've mostly worked in the school system, and I do feel like the people that I've worked with, including people who are very different from me, I mean, some of the people I'm closest to in the world are 2 church ladies. I mean, hella church ladies, like serious church ladies. And they love me so much. And when I, talk about polyamory, they think I'm joking, and, but and in the time that I wasn't working at the school, at a school, I really realized that work relationships are super important to me. And I used to think there was something wrong with that. And I'm like, I think that's an orientation just as much, this past weekend being in Columbus. And, I just keep saying, like, when people are like, we're being used as a wedge, it's so ridiculous. Like, queer and trans people are not the problem, we are the solution. Like, Jesus Christ, I was in Columbus and I was performing in a women-owned automotive shop
Yes.
that the back had been converted into a performance space, converted, you know. And when I got there, the electricity was off, but do you think the lesbians canceled that show? Of course not. No, they just went home and got their camping lanterns. And I was like, you fuckers that are like trying to exterminate us, like don't exterminate us. You are gonna need us when it all goes down, like us with our camping lanterns, you know? And watching those women who had done a lot of organizing around event production and how much they worked together. And I was like, yeah, work relationships were there, like they were oriented towards that as well. And that just really is part of my orientation. And I've decided I don't feel shame about it anymore.
It's amazing.
That's great.
Thank you. Anybody want to share something that they found, noticed on their thing other than that great insight?
Oh, yes, just something from the live chat. This is when I was isolated in caregiving, I browsed dating profiles just to remind myself that other people existed out there. That was the parasocial relationships with a catch. And then somebody else said, I was saying earlier that my work as a gender-affirming primary care provider is one of my primary relationships, which is really beautiful. And that's a person who, I mean, I don't think this is a secret, they're doing this in rural Michigan, yeah.
Right. I think Emily does that in one of the stories. She talks about in the 90s doing AIDS work and founding lesbian services in DC, that her work was a primary partner, like in a very generative way, not like a soul-destroying way. Anybody else want to give us one? No? Oh, go on.
I didn't fill it out, but I was thinking about it. And the thought that occurred to me is that 10 years ago, I would have put a lot of my family in the center, and they're not there anymore. Maybe it's hard to write down, and that's interesting to me, and I think it's just how my life has evolved, particularly my non-monogamous life, and they're not really central to that.
Right.
Obviously not part of it, but also not able to relate to it in the way that maybe I hope they would, but my friends have become my family. So they, I put my friends more in the center.
Yes, and our participant was noticing that blood family isn't at the center anymore, and friends and poly family are now really who makes up that important core 6 people. Anybody else notice anything? Yes, Terry.
Well, it's not so much a share as an observation that as I get older, I'm aware that the people who might be at my core are starting to drop out. That the circles become invisible, they fade. Vis-a-vis what you were saying about Amber, the dear people, when they disappear, how does that work? Do other people move into the center, or do we just, if we're a survivor, we're alone?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's something to ruminate
Oh, I think it's really important. And Terry was saying that as she gets older, just for these folks, people are dying or moving away or dropping off out of that thing. So what do you do? And I think one of the reasons I'm doing this is every year I look at it, and like this year, my 6 is in a lot of trouble. Like one's in treatment. One lost a job and is in just really not good shape emotionally. One has a very ill partner, and so their time and energy is really going there. So then I have to do something else with my 6. It's not like I'm dropping them, but I have to notice that the people who are close to me also need to be able to fill me up. So I have to recruit some more people into the 6. Like some people who've maybe been more on the outside, I have to say to myself, that top 6 is in trouble right now, and I've got to shore up my own support for myself. So how am I recruiting, right? Like, so if the bubbly ones around you have been less intimate, maybe there's ways to start to develop more intimacy with them. Maybe in your pillars, you've got a social group there, right? That you could show up at more and start to look around, right? I think as we get older, we think, well, people aren't really gonna come in and be that close late in the game, right? But it's kind of amazing if you stay open, like you can really keep falling in love with friends and lovers all the way through. But we have to sort of be awake to what's going on in that network, I think, right? And take stock. I've really had to think about it this year because it's felt almost like I'm in a breakup because I have so much less intimacy because other people are in distress. So then it's like just required me to be like, oh, then I'm gonna have to, keep tilling up loved ones for me.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, one of the things when I coach people about, usually people who are kind of, dyad caregiving, first of all, is not, that's not awesome, it's not safe for the caregiver or care receiver, and we know that all of us are both, right? But what I say with building caregiving teams, especially not folks who are kind of oriented our way, it's like making brownies. You always need a bigger bowl. Start with a bigger bowl. Start with a bigger fucking bowl, and then you won't have all the like brownie dust flying everywhere. The more you can do to start with a bigger bowl, just like the better the brownies are gonna come out.
That's so important. And for me, it's always like, don't try and have everything in the same bowl. Like, use 2 bowls. It's okay. If you're gonna wash 1 bowl, you can wash 2 bowls, So literally, for me, part of why I'm in grad school. Like, I didn't expect to be in grad school. It's kind of sudden. And in part, it felt important when Cecilia Gentili died. I was just like, fuck it. Nothing's ever gonna be okay again, and I still feel that way. And I just was like, I have to change everything. So I'm in grad school. And also it was because I needed something to show up to and a reason to be in New York. Or for a specific reason to be in this specific place at a specific time, because there's some things here that are very difficult. And now I'm just in contact with many more people a day or a week than I have been in many years. And many of them live really differently than me, and they actually are endangering me. Despite I have some very good accommodations, I can share my accommodations letter with people who are in school that want to kind of push it. But I am doing that to see who there is my people, who is available there. And I'm walking into the QD Grad Center, and I am feeling the presence of people like Amber. I'm feeling some of the history there. I have one old friend from ACT UP Philly who's a department chair, and that's the big reason I decided to go there, just so I can see him every couple of weeks. I had to do this sort of radical intervention to switch up my life. So I could get less isolated in a particular way, and sort of try people out and try people on. But the other thing is that I just think it's important to name that I think people who understand what happens when people with HIV don't get treatment, and have lived through that in the US, we're in a particular place, I'll say for myself, a particular place of sort of re-traumatization and anticipation right now, and it's awful. It's awful to see everything that we fought for, everything, me in particular, and so many of us and so many others built and happened and put in place where right now, there's an injection you can take once a year that will prevent you from getting fucking HIV, and no one's gonna get it, right? And more people are gonna get HIV and die of HIV because of what's happening right now. That is such an insult to my ancestors and our ancestors, right? It's very, very painful. I don't know what my point is or what has to do with this, but it's awful, and we deserve to be amongst either in the company of others who understand that, or be with other people who are blissfully unaware of it, or whatever it is. We deserve to have some sort of understanding or distance from it right now, because it's a particular kind of all the terrible things that are happening right now. It's a particular kind of terrible, and also to see it's a particular kind of terrible that they're particularly trans people, they're trying to destroy us in particular. And for those amongst us who can acknowledge that and see that the Stonewall Monument says LGB, it wasn't taken down. We have a positive protester in the audience. A sign that says care for trans kids. So, that there's not, wow, guess what? Guess what hasn't been taken down? Same-sex marriage, right? So we see we're being pushed apart, and a lot of us could have kind of predicted this would happen. So it's more important than ever to sort of know who this is, and to also be speaking up these things if they are important to us to identify and name, because who really is in these circles with us and who isn't? you know, because we can't just assume based on sexuality or gender or age or history or whatever, you can't assume any of it. So I think it's a time for people to really get to identify what each of us really needs, like in our soul, like in our spirit, what is most important to us, and to kind of go for unfettered access to whatever that is, you know?
Thank you. Thank you for that. I do feel Amber in the room. So I think I want to close out with sort of a tangential idea, which is like, how do we make amends when we're breaching trust, which happens, you know, in all relationship forms and all our friendships and all our lover relationships, but it's often something I'm dealing with people that I coach. They're coming in and there's been a trust breach and they're trying to shift and make a new form. And in the Recovering from a Trust Breach chapter, I have a section on how to make a great apology. And I think this could be our superpower in this period. I think this could be something that could give us a lot of hope, which is to center making amends in our lives and strengthening the networks we already have with the people in our lives. So this is from Mia Mingus and Dean Spade's work, because I think we're really not taught what the elements of a good apology are. Like, we don't really know how to do it. So I have one. Say you're sorry. Simple, no equivocations. And I'm sorry you feel hurt, guys, is not an apology. It's actually a shitty non-apology. And I tell you, people who tell me that now, they are just gone. I do not hang with people who tell me they're sorry I'm hurt. I'm sorry I hurt you by telling lies over many months is an apology. Name the hurt. I told you lies over and over and made you think you were jealous or creating problems because I was trying to cover my tracks. Or, and no backdoor discussion of your partner's issues when you do this. Like another one that I really have heard, I know this was hard on you because you have insecurity issues. Okay? So that also is, you know, a total slam. Mask does. I know this was hard on you, hon. Because name the impact. I know over time this made you question yourself and nearly drove you crazy. Or, I know that you can't trust me now and that I will have to work to regain your trust. Take responsibility by naming your actions. I know I could have told you about my loneliness or my attraction to X, but I chose to hide those feelings and to start an affair instead. In my mind, this step is one of the most crucial parts of the apology to get. Often people who have broken a partner's trust will say something like, things were messed up in the relationship for a long time, or relationships are dynamic, I didn't get here all by myself, which may be true, but the decision to break trust and deceive, responsibility for that rests solely on the person taking the action. Making a true apology rests on your willingness to own your behavior 100% without reservation or footnotes. And I wonder if any of us have an experience they want to talk about, but I recently received an amends from someone I just had given up on ever getting an amends from. And it was just like so incredibly transformational. It's transformed a whole bunch of other relationships in my life. It's, you know, and again, I think when we don't know if we're ever going to get an apology for something that's really hurt us, you know, the best that we can do is kind of, you know, close up shop, you know, emotionally on that person and move forward, right? And take care of ourselves and do the best we can. But I think because, you know, we need each other so much, as we were talking about in these times, thinking about how to create hope by making our own apologies right now, right? And building our networks by taking responsibility for ourselves in ways that we haven't. Because one of the things that happened was after that amends came, I had things I could do too, right? Because even though I was clearly, you know, in the great queer calculus of things, the more wronged person, there were things that I could also take responsibility for. So I wonder if anybody has anything they want to say about that. Oh, go, Liz.
I just want to say, I think it's implied, but I'd like it to be said aloud here, that just like we start by saying humans are prone to jealousy, it's about how we deal with it. I think in every relationship, conflict is inevitable.
Right. Yeah.
It's all about, like when clients come to me and say, but we're arguing sometimes, and I'm like, okay, conflict's inevitable, that's not the problem.
Right.
Do you have a repair process? And I think an apology can be part of the repair process,
Right.
but some don't require that, depending on what the breach was,
Right.
or the hurt.
Right, right. And apologies are transformational,
Yes.
right? I mean, they really are. And what I have in the book is apology is like the step one, and then there's like actual committing to honesty and not, keeping that behavior going. And that's like really serious work. That's why people pay you the big bucks, Liz, because changing your behavior, even when you know you don't like it and it's caused harm, that is serious work. So you have the apology, honesty, consistency over time, and then you have the opportunity to rebuild trust. So I think, in the moment that we're in, really upping our relational skills with each other and committing to them is something we actually can do, right? We have control over it. Anything?
Thoughts, feelings?
There's something in the chat that I think is worth, I give my, this is really interesting. So I know that this person is like a direct service professional with a kid who sometimes needs help apologizing. I was feeling blank, but I shouldn't have done blank, the thing, sorry. And always encouraged to ask if they can then help somehow, which I think is great. Like that, that's at a level we can all understand. I feel like that's really great.
I think the thing that I would add is that even if someone apologizes, it doesn't mean that things are gonna work out, and so part of this, and I think part of this is my experience with finding recovery talk and steps and whatnot helpful, is just like, we don't have control. What we have control over, hopefully, is being able to sort of come clean and be honest and be genuine in a moment. It doesn't mean that then the person is going to forgive, or that, trust will be rebuilt. Maybe trust will be rebuilt and it's rebuilt through distance, and so being able to, to apologize without trying to game the outcome is, I think, both particularly what makes it a genuine apology and makes it really hard to do, right? To let go of the results.
That's great. I'm going to read this one bit by Dean Spade, who's one of the contributors in the book, and his new book, Love in a Fucked Up World, How to Raise Hell, Build Relationships, and Hook Up, is also out this year. And he and I are doing a couple of shared events in DC and Baltimore, May 1st and the 3rd. So if you're around, come see us. But he has this great piece in here that says, "No one is perfectly trustworthy. 13 years into our relationship, my boyfriend lied to me. We had some agreements about safer sex in our open relationship, and he broke them and lied about it. We had come through a lot by then. He had gotten sober about 5 years before, and I could see why he did it. He had a very controlling parent, especially around his sexuality, and he grew up feeling very hemmed in emotionally. He had to keep a lot of secrets just to be himself. This kind of sneaking around wasn't about me, it was just his trauma resurfacing. I knew what he did wasn't meant to hurt me, and what he did really didn't endanger me. In fact, if he had asked me, I would have easily agreed to changing our guidelines. I think when he did it, he was in denial about breaking my trust, like he wasn't even aware he was lying. But being lied to really hurt me and undermined our relationship. When people lie to me, I feel like they're trying to control my reality, and I resented being put in the position of his controlling parents in his internal story, because that's the last thing I want to be. I let him know that lying was a deal breaker for me and that he needed to figure out why he had lied and make a meaningful apology, or I was done. And he did this, which was wonderful. But what really struck me during the whole crisis was that I was not in crisis. I was so much less emotionally activated than I expected, and that was because in the whole of our life together, my boyfriend is wonderful. He's extremely trustworthy. He works so hard on his emotional growth, and he's generous and loving with me. And this was a mistake. This mistake came out of work he still needs to do. It hurt me, but it wasn't about me, and I could see this clearly. Our forgiveness work of many years really held us in this period. I love imperfect him, and he loves imperfect me. And I can take care of myself and still believe in him when issues arise, because he takes responsibility for himself. The deal is there are no guarantees. There's no perfect love out there. There's no the one. There's just each of us struggling to act according to our values and deeply caring for each other as best we can as we grow. It's a good note to end on. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you,
JD.
Kelly, thank you, Jamie, thank you, bookstore, thank you, audience.
So there are copies of Polyamory for Dummies at the back of the room, and Jamie will be happy to sign your book.